I want to talk about what you guys do. I want to put it in perspective of how important it is what you guys do. So I'm going to take us back. Let's go back a little bit of a flashback in time to 1945, 1946. Okay, we had over 1 million soldiers, men and women, returning from World War II. We all know about the cost of that war. You know, almost 50,000 dead. You know, over 100,000 wounded. It was a huge price that Canada paid for freedom. Now, those soldiers came back to a combination of support. We had government programs that provided, if you guys remember, maybe aunts or uncles and you know, fathers that were provided with maybe loans or grants for building a house. Perhaps they were sponsored through university and college. You know, maybe they were given business startup money or sent to a trade school. I mean, all in all, Canada put through, you know, over 100,000 people, veterans from that war, through schools, 55,000 through universities, 5,000 teachers, 3,000 doctors, 8,000 engineer veterans came out of that program. And Canadians all rallied around supporting those soldiers. Now we know that longer term there's been some price they paid. We know that veterans in their 70s and 80s and even 90s now are starting to experience some flashbacks from the war. You know, as they age, and you know, whereas before they managed to get on with life. Now, the reason why they were able to get on with life was not just because of the government support, but there was widespread knowledge amongst Canadians. They all knew what the cost of war was. All of us had, you know, an aunt, an uncle, a father, a brother, a sister, you know, that you know, paid some price to be in the war. For me personally, my grandfather never returned home and never really got to see, you know, my mother, which was his daughter. So, you know, when they came back, Canadians understood. Canadians understood when they met that soldier, you know, perhaps that soldier had a job and we didn't know what to call it back then, PTSD or shell shock. But, you know, we all knew to give them a bit of an allowance, you know. I'd say, well, that guy was in the war. Okay, let's give him a break. You know, he can take the afternoon off or the day off, or, you know, and then we had the legions, of course, all across the country where the soldiers went and they supported each other and told their stories. So all in all, these soldiers had an immense blanket of social support and government support that made them feel what they did was important. Now I want to take you to a bit of a sadder story. After 1953, Canadian Forces veterans didn't enjoy any of those programs. That we have now almost 600,000 veterans, 90,000 serving members, and none of those programs have been made available to those soldiers. So when they came back from peacekeeping missions, and we all know, you know, we've seen the press that the peacekeeping missions were soft-sold to us as, you know, little police actions, and I'm not going to get into the politics or the messiness of it, but what did it mean for a soldier when he saw horrific things over there, and he came back and Canadians didn't know what he suffered because there was nothing in the media or you know, there was a little paragraph in the newspaper. And in fact, you know, between 1953 and the late 70s, there was less than 5 articles in all of the major newspapers in Canada on how Canadian Forces veterans were treated. You know, and people will say, well, that's because they were, you know, they didn't need any help. Well, let's put the numbers in perspective. Over 10% of those Canadian Forces veterans are suffering lifelong injuries from their service in the military. Over 1,800 Canadian Forces members died in service during peacetime. During those 50 years. There was a horrible price to be paid, but you know, the price goes far beyond just those kind of numbers. The price goes when those people came back and Canadians didn't know what they suffered. So they came back and you know, perhaps they hid in their basements, and you know, perhaps they went out to the woods and got a cabin, you know. Perhaps they said, you know what, I don't deserve very much. I'm going to take that, you know, night security job, and you know, and they just went on with their lives and no one knew what they went through. Now, there's been a dramatic change in attitude towards that over the past 10 years. I mean, Afghanistan has helped immensely, but Canadians are now much more aware what it means to serve in the military. But still, we have soldiers coming back that they say fall through the cracks. In my experience, it's more like a one-man bridge over a canyon, and lots of soldiers fall through there. So where do you guys come in? You guys come in because you represent that direct, tangible support. You guys give a hug to these soldiers coming back, and you show them something beautiful that you made with your heart, and you say, look, I really appreciate what you did. Now, when we talk about psychological injuries, and even those that aren't suffering so bad psychologically, the number one predictor whether these people will be able to get on with their lives in a productive way or whether they'll develop post-traumatic stress disorder is social support. And unfortunately, a lot of it is still lacking in spite of the broad awareness because Canadians don't know how to connect with those soldiers when they come back. And the soldiers don't know how to tell their stories. But there's something about a quilt made from the heart that's made with all the colors that we are as human beings, that we see and we feel. And the soldiers get that. They receive that in their hands, and they get to look at that every day as a tangible representation of what, now this is where I'm going to start crying, as a tangible representation of what it means to have served you and to serve the rest of Canadians. Because we seem to have forgotten, in a large part on an individual level, what it means when someone is willing to risk their lives so that we can quilt or work or raise families in freedom. And I can't tell you that when Don Leonardo of Veterans of Canada called me up and he says, Mary Ewing's going to contact you from Quilts of Valour. I'm like, what? Yeah, I mean, lots of people contact. What does that mean? Well, first of all, I want to put a bit of perspective on that. Me, like a lot of soldiers, I don't feel I deserve anything, right? That if we got back and government didn't say thank you for your service, that means I didn't really do anything to deserve a thank you. So it was a real psychological leap for me that when I met Mary at the JPSU here in Ottawa, and she gave me the quilt, well, the wall went down. I know what it meant. I didn't have words for it. But I knew in my heart as the tears started to come out that, my God, Canadians really do appreciate what I went through. Canadians really do appreciate what I gave for them, and they're giving back in a way that is just so meaningful. I mean, what is more meaningful than a blanket of appreciation and love that's made from the heart that wraps people in security? What's the first thing we do in a hospital when a baby comes out? We wrap them in a blanket. What's the first thing we should do with our soldiers when they come back? Wrap them in a blanket. And that's what you guys do. And so when I received this quilt, and I'm still scared to wrap myself in a blanket because I'll cry like a baby and hide and cower in the corner. But this is, for me, this is just absolutely, it's stunning. 2 colors for me, but it says much more than just 2 colors, doesn't it? It's just beautiful. So I'm so moved by this, and I'm personally appreciative of what you've done for me. And I'm, because I can't think about me very much, I'm even more appreciative of what you're doing for all of the Canadian veterans that are coming home. And I hear feedback from family members too, that, where they saw that they're, once upon a time that they're perhaps, their husband or their son or their dad couldn't talk about their service anymore, all of a sudden felt that they deserved to tell their stories. And those are the things that this quilt does that are so difficult to articulate, and it affects every veteran in so many different ways, but it affects them, trust me. And I wanted to thank you all for doing what you do. And hopefully I'll get around and meet all of you, and you can pay attention a bit to me, but probably more to Wilfie and Carolina. and I wanted to thank you all. You're just doing great, meaningful work that goes far beyond just sewing colors and material and patterns together. You're sewing hearts and healing them, and I thank you for that.